All right, you guys. So you should be nearing the finish line on your research papers. At this point, you should be long done with your note cards. You should have taken those 50 note cards, put them into an outline, broken it down by sections, then paragraphs, and then sentences, and each of those sentences should have an inline citation in MLA style at the end of them. If you've been keeping up, if you did all those things, then good news, you're like 80% done. It's really just a matter of putting stuff together at this point. It's super easy. I just want to kind of take you guys through the process. This is a PowerPoint that I've shown you, 9 million times or something like that. So bear with me. I did tweak it to make it specific to research papers, and I've also added a bunch to it so that it takes you through the whole process rather than like we usually just use this for the introductions. So anyway, we're going to launch right into it. So how to write an essay. You guys know this stuff. Say it with me. 4 things in every essay. You got an intro, you got a body, you got a conclusion. We're going to talk about all that. And then of course you have a thesis, that thesis being the most important part of your essay. It's the whole point of your essay. So the thing here becomes that typically a thesis is like a super lazy single sentence response to the prompt. So normally I give you a prompt. With a research essay, your prompt is crazy easy. All I want you to do is tell me why was whatever you're doing important. Prompts that I'm just going to use kind of as an example. What is important about the government of the Confederate States of America? Sorry, I got a typo in there. But the prompt becomes, what is important about the government in the Confederate States of America? So to answer that prompt, it's as simple as, I say, many Americans think of the Civil War as just an attempted revolution, but in truth, the South believed they were a totally new and independent country from America, complete with their own leadership. So it's really just what your thesis becomes is why this was worth researching. So if you did the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, my prompt for you becomes, why was it important that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated? If you did a specific battle of the war, then why was that battle important? Whatever it is, again, if that sounds really easy, if that sounds really like simple and straightforward, it's because it is. Don't overthink that. So going through our introduction with that information, your introduction gets your reader ready to read your essay. So the same way that if I'm going to give you guys a lecture in social studies class, I don't just dive right into it. The first thing I do is I kind of tell you what we're going to be talking about and why we're going to be talking about it. That's what your introduction's for. Again, I know you guys have done this a million times. You're going to start with a hook. People don't like reading boring stuff. You want to convince them immediately that your essay is not boring stuff. And that is hard to do. I always say the first and the last sentence of your essay are the hardest sentences. So you guys know most of my hook hacks. Talk about death or dying. Talk about how something killed people, especially if it killed a lot of people, because that's the other thing. Use big numbers. Talk about how 99% of this is that. Or talk about how 80 million somethings every something. Whatever it is. Those two things, either talking about how dramatic and death-defying something is, or how big and grand something is, those are great ways to start. When we're talking about history papers and when we're talking about research papers, the other hook hack that I would consider is just, what's the big deal? Why does this matter? Is your topic something that changed the world? Is it something that changed history forever? Did it change the world? The Civil War absolutely changed the world. It changed the way that the United States worked. The United States is one of the biggest and most powerful countries in the world. The Civil War in and of itself definitely changed the world. Did it alter the course of history? Yeah, absolutely. America had slaves before the Civil War. We no longer have slaves. That's an insane change in history. Is it something that impacts or impacted a lot of people? Again, absolutely. Prior to the Civil War, millions of people were enslaved in America. After the Civil War, no one was. So whatever those things are, being able to touch on them, that's a great way to hook your reader. Then you're going to make sure you state your points. If the point is that I'm going to argue that a lot of people don't know that the South thought of themselves as their own country, then my points are the things that lead up to and include when the South was its own country. So there's 2 things to notice there. Again, 1, my whole big point of my essay is going to be that the South had another president, basically. That's something, and why it matters is because I don't think a lot of people know that. So the point of my essay is to tell people about something that I think is significant that a lot of them didn't know. My points that build me to that are, there's 5 of them, and I briefly touch on them in each of those sentences. Now, the big thing that you're going to notice, as opposed to my other 2 examples here about listing your points, In those other examples, I list my points in about one sentence because it's a short essay, it's only a page long, and I'm going to make 3 points that I'll talk about a lot more later. This is a big, long research paper, so I go through and I give each page its own sentence, and I lay out the topics that I'm going to be discussing in this big, long, roughly 5-page paper. So it's just something to keep in mind. This is probably, your introductions in this are going to look bigger than other introductions you've written. I don't think they're harder. Each of those sentences are things that you have enough notes to write a page on, so it should be really easy to write one sentence about them. But just keep that in mind, that stating your points in a situation like this is probably going to be bigger, and it's probably going to result in a bigger introduction paragraph. And then finally, connect them to your thesis. So, likewise, my thesis is going to be a little bit bigger because it's a bigger paper. And my thesis, though, is really simple in this case. It's just that, again, if I say, why was the Confederate States of America important, or why was the government of the Confederate States of America important, I say that that's because many Americans think of the Civil War as just an attempted revolution, but in truth, the South believed they were a totally new and independent country from America, complete with their own leadership. To me, that's the big point of my paper. That's my thesis. So again, that should be just the tiniest bit different, but it should be something you guys have done like a million times up to this point. So from there, we'll get into some new stuff. Body paragraphs in a research paper. The good news is these should be probably the easiest body paragraphs you've ever written. Your outline is basically your paper. It's basically done. You should have all of your thoughts organized into paragraphs, and it should just be a matter of moving them over and making them look like paragraphs. And so while you do that, just a couple simple things. Make sure, obviously, that they're in complete sentences. And maybe the biggest misstep that I see with 8th graders who work through these research papers is to make sure that your sentences flow and connect. So if you organize this well, it should tell a story. You should start by giving me background on that story. You should go into kind of the real meat and potatoes, the climax of that story. And then at the end, you should kind of resolve it. Again, that's going to depend on your topic, so it's hard for me to give specific examples, but just make sure, don't overthink it. Just make sure that your sentences read like they're in order and read like they make sense. So then the only thing that's at all tricky in this that I want you to look out for, you should have created those inline citations. They should be in your outline. They should also be super easy to transfer over. So with those citations, there's just a couple little, simple semantic rules that I want to talk about with you guys. So first off, when you're citing the same source in several sentences and you have 3 citations like that, I just want you to put one citation at the end of it. So here's my example. In my outline, I have 3 facts here. I have that Jimmy Hoffa married Jane Pazowski. I still can't say that name. They had 2 children and bought a home in Northwest Detroit, and that she would later be the last person to see him alive. Crazy, creepy, spooky. So I have a citation after each of those because they were 3 note cards, and I wanted to make sure that I know where I got each of those 3 facts from. But then you can see when I put them in my paper, I tell them all in sequence, right? Those 3 note cards become kind of just a short paragraph. I just stick one at the end. So just something to look out for. Similarly, you may have created a citation that just uses a title. That's when you didn't have an author, and you didn't have page numbers. If that's the case, then you're going to just get it down to a title. And so it can be really tempting for you to, in your outline, create a citation that looks like this. The name of the article was Events in the Disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa, so I write parentheses, Events in the Disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. When you move it into a paper, I want you to just shorten that title down to 3 words. At the beginning of next week, we'll talk about creating works cited pages. So on your works cited page, you'll have way more details about the source and where you got it from. But at this point, all you really need to have is just enough words that your reader can go to that works cited page and get the information that they need. So Events in the Disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa just becomes events in the ... Don't forget that ... if you cut things off. That's called an ellipses. It indicates that there is more to the title and that you just cut it off because it made it read a little bit better. This just keeps your reader from having to jump over huge, giant, long citations like that. Right, and then the last one that I want you guys to watch out for, not a huge deal, but just if you take any 2 points in your outline and you combine them into one sentence, make sure that it should be, it's one parenthesis set, just with both citations inside of it. I squished those 2 points together, so I just have, you can see, one set of parentheses In that parentheses, I have biography.com, comma, livescience.com. Just means that that last sentence got its facts from two different sources. And then so finally, we're on to the conclusion, which again is very old hat and super familiar for you guys. We've been through it about a cajillion times this year. I just want to talk about it specifically in the context of writing a research paper. So your conclusion is basically working like your introduction in reverse. So it's your introduction, but kind of flipped on its head. Instead of going hook, points, thesis, now we're going to go thesis, points, leave them thinking, or release, which is a lot like a hook. So your first one, restate your thesis. Just basically remind your reader what the whole point of your paper was. I will tell you that I would love it if you can restate your thesis in a new way, like in your own words a little bit differently. That's what I would call an A paper. Between you and me, a secret moving forward in life is if you're feeling super lazy or if you feel like you just can't come up with it, just straight up restating your thesis exactly the same way you wrote it in the introduction works. It's not the best. It's a little lazy, but I'd say that's a B. Writing it in new words is like something you would see in an A paper. So just something for you to keep in mind. If you're really stuck on that, don't stress it too much. Just write it over the same way. Remind your reader of your points. Pretty quick. You don't have to run through every little detail. Just quickly remind them of the stuff that you talked about. You want to take everything you just said and you want to roll it up nice and neat so they can store it as one clean memory in their head. And then finally, you want to leave them thinking. So when they walk away from your paper, why do they think that it was worth their time to read your paper? So what was your topic? Why did it matter? What was the big deal about whatever you just talked about? Did it change something? Or maybe something needs to change? Whatever that might be. Again, it's going to vary from topic to topic. And like I always tell you guys, that first and last sentence are the toughest ones to write in a paper. So restating your thesis. On the top here, you have my intro thesis. That's exactly the way that I stated in my intro. And then you can see my conclusion thesis. If you guys read through both of those, you'll see that they're pretty similar. There's even a little bit of shared language between the two of them. But so that's just tweaking them the tiniest bit is what takes you from a good paper to a great paper. Restating your points. Again, like I said, you can be a little bit briefer even in the conclusion than you were in the intro. Your readers just read a whole bunch of stuff about this point. So you just want to remind them. You just don't want them to forget the stuff. So there you see the way that I did it in the intro and the way that I did it in the conclusion. Accomplishes a lot of the same things, just does it a little bit differently and uses a little bit of fresh language. And then again, so this hardest part, leaving your reader thinking. I ask you, why does this topic matter? If my thesis was that not a lot of people knew this, but it's important, then I want to just kind of remind them of that, and I want to maybe make a connection to the day. That's the trickiest or the easiest way to wrap up just about any social studies or history paper you're ever going to write. I want you guys to get typing up these papers. It shouldn't take you that long, as again, a lot of this is just going to be copy and pasting from your outline. So I'm going to say that by next Friday, as in a week from tomorrow, you guys are going to need to turn in your complete 5-page paper, complete with a works cited page, and some proper formatting, which are the two things I'm going to put a video out early next week to help you guys with. That part's really, really, really easy. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope that you're holding together at the end here as things wind down. I've seen a lot of your passion projects. They're super cool. I'm really excited to see the final products. And I'm even more excited, if I'm being perfectly honest, to see these papers that you guys turn in next week. So keep being awesome. Keep being cool. I like you so much. I don't know how to end these videos. All right, bye.